Growing up? Well, where do I start? At the beginning, of course. I was born on the 22nd of November 1973, meaning at the start of. Writing this journal, I'm 39 years old. A little about myself: I'm one of a twin, and my brother's called Keith, and we're what are known as mirror image twins. We look identical, yet I'm right-handed and he's left. People quite often ask me, what's it like being a twin? I'm monumentally bored of that question now, so I shut them up by asking another, what's it like being a singleton? I also have a sister called Teresa, who's 4 years older than me. I also have a mother called Margaret, who's in her 70s. I would tell you her actual age, but I keep forgetting. My dad passed away in 1986. I've been told his name was David, hence my middle name. My very first memory is play fighting on my parents' bed. I think it was with my dad. I have more childhood experiences which I've learnt from my family, but mostly from my brother. If I were to list them all, this would be a massively huge piece of writing. Therefore, I think I had a fairly normal upbringing. By the time my education was coming to an end, I had had a few run-ins with the police. After leaving school, without any qualifications, these run-ins began to escalate into quite major crimes. I even woke up in a few police cells and can imagine myself thinking, where am I? What have I done now? My remaining memories start sometime during senior school or secondary school, whatever you call it. It's around this time I had my first proper girlfriend. After about 8 months of being together, she asked to take it to the next level. I refused and we broke up shortly afterwards. She then met this other boy. Surprisingly, the three of us got along okay. I then learned he was dying. He was a hemophiliac with a very rare blood group. He didn't really care about himself, but why should he? He knew he could go at any time. He was a smoker and a drinker. I had no interest in drinking then, but I did admire his carefree attitude. He asked me to stand guard one night, while he burgled this girl I knew. After the deed, we went back to his and in the morning sold the stuff to one of his friends. Easy Money, my oldest friend, who then went on holiday, unknowingly asked me to watch his house. We had drifted apart, thanks mostly to me meeting this kid who was dying. What did I do? It was so easy to make money the last time, so I stood guard again. More easy money. I did feel more than a little bad though, consoling my oldest friend, when I knew what had happened. The feeling of guilt got so bad in the end, that I walked into a police station and came clean. As I confessed to my crimes, my burden of guilt was lifted, only to be replaced by another burden of guilt, towards my dying friend. In the process of coming clean, I had to land my friend in trouble. He never did forgive me fully. He soon became very ill and died. I tried leaving the past in the past. Obviously I didn't, or I wouldn't be writing about it now. Soon after school was over for the last time, I was daydreaming while walking to my dead-end job, thanks mostly to leaving school with no qualifications. I started going to church. Even though I went every Sunday, I felt I only knew 1 or 2 people. Alas, I trusted them. They were like brothers to me. I got up to mischief with my twin brother and the 2 lads from church, and we all ended up on bail for arson. We jumped bail and found ourselves on the outskirts of a small historic city in Herefordshire, where we got friendly with a farmer. He was a strange creature called a Christian. So, we moved into his farm and slept there by night and worked there by day. Typically, we messed up and got arrested for theft by deception in the nearest city, causing the farmer to kick out a couple of us that he saw as ringleaders, splitting up the 2 most prolific instigators from the subdued ones. Initially, just 2 of us went back home to Bristol. To cut a long story short, when the theft by deception and arson charges reached Crown Court, all 4 of us ended up in prison. What felt like a lifetime later, I got out and immediately went on a Christian camp. Everyone seemed to be elated due to the Holy Spirit. I was just elated to be free. That's where I met this girl. She wanted a cigarette. As I had loads, I gave her one. You know what it's like when 2 people just click. Well, it was like that. I could just stare into those eyes all day. I ended up marrying her. We had our only child together shortly after getting married. Being the first of my children, I also call her number one. I then went to night school hoping to be a normal part of society. Well, I say night school, it wasn't even at night. It was more like college. My first wife and I were obviously too young, as we soon got divorced. We grew apart and I also lost touch with my oldest child. On no more than a rebound at first, I met the girl who was later to become my second wife. Shortly after we began dating, my niece died of cot death and my sister disappeared out of depression. I felt lost, because I couldn't grieve alongside my sister or support in her time of sorrow. As if to rub salt in my wounds, my past nabbed me and I ended up back in prison. After serving time, I managed to get a job in the city center. It was in a restaurant, where I started off as a humble waiter and worked my way up to become a supervisor. Wanting more prospects, I left my job at the restaurant and found employment in a home furniture store. Climbing my way up from being a shelf stacker, I again made it to the rank of supervisor. I then made the biggest mistake of my career up till then. I quit. The unsociable hours and the strain it was playing on my marriage got too much, so I applied for a new job as an assistant floor manager for a different company, and this improved matters between my spouse and I. Soon after, a burglary and arson attack was committed at our house. I had a rough idea who organized it, but I had no proof. The stress this caused me meant that I couldn't carry on working, knowing someone was out there trying to ruin my family's life. The mythical word karma springs up though, as I had committed both these crimes myself in the past, which even made me a suspect. My second wife and I had 2 children together, a girl then a boy. My second marriage then ended up in the same place as the first one, what with the pressures of life and adultery. Later, I then met the girl who was to become my girlfriend, and before long we had our first child together, who was to be my fourth. Initially, to sleep at night, I began having a nightcap. This soon metamorphosed into drinking every day, just to function. Very soon I was an alcoholic. My life took a pivotal turn in July of 2009, when I was struck by a car. Not only did this render me unconscious with many injuries, but also it threw me into a deep coma, some 2 months long. When I finally did come around, I found myself in BIRU, French Hospital's brain injury rehabilitation unit, only to come round to the news that my girlfriend had given birth to our second boy. He was my 5th child. I was unsure as to why I was in hospital at first. I didn't ask why, I didn't even care. I was more concerned with the fact that I was in bed, unable to even sit up without the assistance of staff. It soon became apparent that I'd been hit by a car traveling at 70 miles per hour. Unknown to me, probably because I was in a coma, the police had found my sister and told her I was knocking on death's door. Fortunately, death was busy elsewhere. I was soon consumed by guilt towards the driver of the car that hit me, because it's not every day you're minding your own business, traveling along a motorway, when all of a sudden some idiot walks in front of your car. I was told his young daughter was in the car at the time. This only added to my guilt. Try as I might, I just couldn't regret my accident, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I had my sister back in my life. Secondly, and more fundamentally, because I slowly started talking to my eldest child again. Prior to the accident, we weren't really that close, but after the accident we were like a father and daughter should be. She soon became my best friend. My girlfriend turned into my ex-girlfriend. She couldn't handle my injuries. Momentarily, I was caught up in a whirlwind of emotion and dropped into an unforgiving, relentless and empty world of devastation. I felt like a derelict house, laid bare and devoid of all feeling. In a strange sort of way, I felt a sense of relief that I wouldn't burden the mother of my boys and the woman I supposedly loved. As if having my new disabilities to handle wasn't enough, I had to face the prospect of coping with this alone. She wasn't happy just destroying me. She just had to rub salt in my wounds, didn't she? By stealing my 2 youngest boys. In that instant, I lost everything: my sons, my independence, my rented house, and the woman I loved. From BIU I moved to the Oak House, a rehabilitation home in Tewkesbury. That's where I met a carer called Dave. Dave was a little odd. He was either on drugs constantly or had a secret. I asked him and he told me his secret was called Jesus. I wanted to find out more about this Jesus guy, so he took me to a church in Cheltenham to attend an Alpha course. It's a course where you learn more about this Jesus guy and what it means to be a Christian. It's here I learned that he could save me and he could give me eternal life by believing in him. Jesus really was the Son of God and not some deluded fruitcake. And I also learned after the course there was a weekend away. It's there I prayed for the first time as far as I can remember, since my accident anyway. I prayed for guidance and forgiveness for everything I've done wrong in my life, which I'm pretty sure is most of it. I got baptized the very next day, once we all returned to Cheltenham. From that moment on, I lived for Jesus. Shortly afterwards, I moved back to Bristol. It was here I started to attend Woodlands Church, and the associate pastor arranged for someone to take me each Sunday. I finally felt home. This ginger-haired hippie lookalike also worked for DCF Disabled Christians Fellowship. Simon, the hippie lookalike, started taking me to a deaf church as well. This was not because I'm deaf, but because I can't talk too well. Really, it was a good job I already knew how to fingerspell. When I was in the company of people fluent in sign language, it helped me communicate faster than using my alphabet board that I quite often forgot. My first wife and I had been taught how to fingerspell by her mum's new partner. We only learnt it out of boredom. Plus, it meant we could communicate in public while most people would just scratch their heads. So, what is an ABI? It's an acquired brain injury, where in severe cases such as mine, people need to learn how to do everything again. It's not like we've lost our instinctive way of doing things, but sometimes we need to be reminded how to do something, or if there's a risk involved. You really need to experience a brain injury first to understand a brain injury. There are no words to describe the changes that happen to you. But I'll try anyway. My personality hasn't changed much, I don't think, except that apparently I'm more aggressive now. My sleep cycle has kind of derailed too, meaning I sleep less these days, mind you, that could be age. Also, if something didn't bother me before, it can infuriate me or possibly scare me now. An example of this is when I leave the sanctuary of home by myself. The world seems so big and scary, making me feel deserted and open to attack. Plus, I hated coffee before my accident. I only used to drink tea. Now, it's the other way round. I utterly love coffee yet hate tea. Whereas before my accident my television was always on, now it's nearly always off. And lastly, for now, I spend the majority of my time on my tablet, either on social media or entertaining myself by playing my favorite game. Compare this with the me before my accident. I was completely illiterate when it came to computers or technology. When my accident first happened, I was desperate for my old life back. I now know that's an impossibility. The old me died when that car hit me on the M5 motorway. I don't want that old life back anyway. After all, at the time, I was unhappy enough to be an alcoholic. Going back to how my ABI affects me, take getting dressed for instance. I know how to put clothes on, I just struggle when doing so. Mind you, the paralysis down my right side less than helps. Learning that I can't even trust my memories is definitely one of the hardest things. I don't think I've manufactured any memories, but to be told not to rely on them by a head doctor psychologist puts me in an eddy of doubt, spiraling down into a world of not knowing where this journey of life has taken me. So, I ask some seemingly bizarre questions, though mostly in an effort to learn about my past. Additionally, to learn how to interact with people. For some reason, I push some people too far. I can't comprehend limits. Up until about 3 years after my accident, I was sure the hardest thing to deal with was my wheelchair. However, I now believe it's the inability to produce clear speech. It's so epically lonely. I can't even talk to anyone on the phone. All I wish for is the companionship of a woman to end this painful silence. The worst thing you can do is give me pity. For some reason, I find it degrading. I'm fully aware I've messed up. Pity just reminds me. Thus begins my diary. Now, the first care company I had since living independently, we didn't exactly see eye to eye.